this session is all about information that would enrich you to whatever you do it better with all the information. Information would guide us and help us in different direction. My name is Ashton Ekbatani, and I'm here with Danial Yousefian. We are covering whatever is happening with real estate at this point. Of course, Daniel is a paralegal, and I am a real estate agent, been in business for almost close to 20 years. So time flies. And I cover Toronto, and I am working with buyers, sellers, mostly investors. That's my passion. That's my forte, to work with investors. And real estate investment, it has more to do than simple buying or simple selling, because I have to go through a lot of criteria, make sure the property my client's buying is rentable and is renting on time. I cannot wait for 3 months till this property is ready with a tenant. So there are a lot of things with investment. Buying, selling is much easier and simpler. So Daniel, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, so my name is Danial Yousefian from Yousefian Legal Services. I'm a licensed paralegal. I deal with a lot of landlord and tenant issues. I have a lot of clients that they're investors. They come to me and they're just landlords trying to save some money, and just try to cover for their expenses of the properties that they have, or one property. Some of them, they're small landlords, some of them they have few properties, and some of them they have rental buildings. So I deal with a lot of landlords, so I understand their concerns, and what they're suffering from, especially in the current market. And on the other side, I deal with a lot of tenants that they are trying to find a home for themselves, for their families. They're trying to, have a roof on their head and, just live the Canadian dream, let's say. And there are a lot of challenges in that side too. It's not easy to be a landlord, or being a tenant. So that's why I had a discussion with you about this session to see if we can review some of the general terms and some of the guidelines to help both sides, that they can have a better understanding. So
absolutely. Let me give you a snapshot of what's happening in the market for better.
That would be great.
Better understand what's going on here. Now, believe it or not, the price of properties this year compared to last year, let's say October 23 compared to October 22, we went up 3.5% on residential properties, not condos. Condo price October this year to last year went down 0.6, which is not much, it's still okay. Now, one thing is driving the direction of the market, mostly for rental in this situation, is, as you know, the price of homes compared to many years ago, and that's a big complaint. How can we afford it? Because the price of home went up so much, but the people's income didn't move up together simultaneously and together. So that created a chaos here. Now, of course, the price of homes are so expensive, then the people cannot buy it, and the mortgage is harder to get with this kind of interest rate. So that automatically pushed people to go towards tenancy. So they all became tenant. Based on the stat I have here, the one-bedroom home prices for rental this year, Q3 of this year, went up 6.1%, and for 2 bedrooms went up 7.8%. Now, knowing that the supply of properties came up on the market also increased for 22%. However, still we are behind. Now, the price of homes so high, people are forced to go to tenancy, at least temporary for now. That push pressure on tenancy. And that's why everything started coming up in terms of, I call it a chaos, in terms of renting. And then more people go to tenancy, that automatically create more issues, more unknown area that we never had it in the past.
That's right.
Like in the past, you know what? I don't like my landlord. I go somewhere else. There's no somewhere else. If you move
Unfortunately.
out of your place 2 years from now, the price of your next home you want to rent is hugely different than what you have right now. I have tenant
That's
in Milton is paying 1,800 for 3 bedrooms house. He's not going to move out. And guess what's
no.
going to happen if the landlord wants to ask him to leave? They're going to come to you. In the past, no problem. You know what? After 2 years, I moved to the next one. Next one, rent didn't go up that much. So that was much easier, but not right now. Things are different. What do you think, Daniel?
You're right, Ashton. Actually, I'm a tenant myself at this point, and when I have a maintenance issue, I try not to call my landlord because I don't want to remind him that, there is a tenant living here and he's paying less than what he should be paying in the current market. So I can't even complain myself. And I know a lot of people that they're scared even to talk to their landlord. And if I want to just give, and I'm not talking, I didn't rent this place like back in 1990s. I just rented this place about 2 to 3 years ago. But the market price for a 1 bedroom, it's about $700 where I live. Like if I want to give the key to the landlord and if I want to get it back, it's going to cost me 700 more per month, which is roughly about 8,000, 7,500 or so more than what it should be. There is a gap, like as you said, people's income, it hasn't increased to the point that they can afford the current market price, but a lot of people, they are forced to. So I'd say it's let's review, you know, how can we not get into problems and how can we resolve them if there are any.
Well, are you looking at the situation from the landlord's point of view is if they have a condo, listen, the condo fee went up, tax
Right.
went up, cost of living, repairing, fixing, everything went up. So I deserve to receive more rent. Now
You're
you
correct.
change your position, put yourself at the place where the tenant is, saying, listen, my salary didn't increase that much. Now you are asking me to pay for everything you go through. That's your problem. And that's exactly where the war between these two categories and the chaos, the ripple effect that affecting everything else is coming up. What government can do, that's your place to tell me legally, Danielle.
Actually, I believe like there is a gap here, Ashton, because like when the banks they try to increase the rate, so people they have to most of the landlords, as you know, they just put 20 or 30% down, sometimes even less, and they buy this place and they're trying to replace their mortgage. They don't want to pay that mortgage. They want the people that they're renting that place to pay for their expenses. So the issue is that they don't have the power to fight with the bank. So what happens, they come to the tenants and they try to say, listen, this is what's happening and you have to increase the rent. And on the other side, as you said, the tenant says, I don't have extra income. I don't have, sometimes people, they're having hard time to just even, supplying food for their families nowadays. It's everything has gone up. So some of them, they can afford. They come to an agreement with the landlord. I'm not saying it's legal or it's not, but some people they do, but some people they have to fight it. So that's where the relationships there become, shady a little bit. They're not clear, so they don't like each other anymore. But that's why we have the rent control laws. So in Ontario, not every landlord can increase the rents. So if they want to increase the rent, they need to do it every year. and they have to serve proper notice to the tenants. And if they want to do that, sometimes it is only this year, I believe the rate is about 2.5. Don't get me wrong. You just have to check it the Landlord and Tenant Board website, because they do some calculation and they just come up with a percentage, but which is close to nothing, honestly, nothing compared to what it should be. But that's it. So, that's how much they can increase the rent. But in comparison, some landlords, they can increase the rent as much as they want. Like, as you know, some units that they're built after a certain date, it is, I don't remember the name, but I just to be on the safe side, I said the units that they're built and they were never occupied before that. The landlords, they're allowed to increase the rent as much as they want, but they just have to serve the proper notice like the other landlords, which I believe these two laws, they're in conflict, because like literally there is no difference between a 2017 condo versus a 2020 condo. But that's what it is. Like, in terms of increasing the rent, they can't increase the rent as much as they want unless it's not rent controlled. So that's an important factor that most of the landlords and tenants, they should know about. So for renters, it's better to find a home that it's like built before 2018, and for the landlords, it's better to purchase an investment property that is built after that date, which I'd say it's close to 2019.
One good question for you. Let's say I'm a landlord and I really don't like you staying in my place that you were occupying for the last 5 years, because once you leave, I can easily add another $1,000 to my rent and charge the new tenant.
Right.
How can I ask you to leave?
It's a good question, Ashton. Like, the way that Ontario is looking at rental places or rental units, it doesn't matter whether they're small landlords or big landlords. You're not selling a product to the people. You're providing home to a family, to a person, to a father, to a mother, to an international student. It doesn't matter. You are a landlord. It's true that the landlord has the ownership, but the tenants, they have the benefits of that property. So they use that property, they just live there, it's their home. So when people they're trying to become a landlord, they have to be very careful with what they're doing. If they're trying to investment in real estate, which is a great investment, but they have to make sure that they know their rights, especially they know the tenants' rights. So it's not easy to evict the tenants because they have what is called security of tenure, which means they can't be evicted unless there is some issue like non-payment of rent or like harassment issue, something that the tenant is like in fault. On the other side, they can require their property back if they require it for their own use or if they sell it and if the new purchaser wants to come in. And I want to emphasize on this point that we can discuss. I believe we had a session like how to sell your property with a tenant. I believe we had a long discussion. But even just because they want to sell the unit, they can't have it back. They can ask the tenant if he's willing to leave, but if the tenant does not have to leave, they can have it for their children. They can sell the property, but they have to sell it with the tenants. And at the end, if the purchaser wants to move in, they have to serve proper notice to the tenant and they have to make sure that they move into the unit. Otherwise, there's going to be severe consequences because you're trying to evict someone from their home. So it's not easy to do that. That's the way that we should look at it. And it's the way that the law is looking at it.
Is that a question for you? Would the tenant landlord board understand the situation for the landlord?
Whatever we're just saying or discussing right now, it's not a legal advice. So it's situation to situation, case by case is different. Like we had a case that the landlord, we had to challenge the landlord's N12, which was a notice that the landlord requires the unit for his or her own use, but we challenged it. We took it to the LTB, so the landlord had to come and explain why he or she needs the unit, and unfortunately the landlord couldn't satisfy the member that he or she needs the unit. So they dismissed the tenant's, my apologies, they dismissed the landlord's application, and the landlord has to start over. It's not easy to prove it, but if there are genuine intentions, I believe it's not going to be hard either, because there are documentations. Like, for example, if a landlord has few properties, like one and all of them, they're in one city, and the landlord wants to try to evict the tenant, he has to come and explain why he needs that unit specifically, because it's challenging, right? But sometimes they just have one property and they want it for their daughter. So the daughter cannot come and leave because they have priority over to the tenant. But as I said, case by case is different. Every case we have to see what it is, and we have to do it the right way, so
And
we can
can the
expect a
tenant
good
refuse?
result.
Can the tenant refuse to leave?
Absolutely, they can. If they're, there are two important parts when people they're trying to. First, let me explain that in Ontario, it's the landlord and tenant board who's governing the relationship between the landlord and tenants. So unless someone has an eviction order from a landlord and tenant board, they cannot evict the tenant themselves. So at the beginning, the landlord can only provide notice to the tenant. That, like, for example, into a notice, one of the reasons it can be that I want the unit for my own use. So, and it requires minimum 60 days notice, that saying that you have to leave this place and I'm giving you a 1 month's compensation that is required by law. The tenant has on the other side two options. The one option is just that to leave that place and leave it to the landlord. And the other option is just to challenge and dispute that notice, to say, listen, I don't believe that you want to use this unit for your own use. I believe you want to do this because you want to increase the rent on me. So that's when the landlord can apply to the LTB, Landlord and Tenant Board. And, someone has to hear this case, which is the Landlord and Tenant Board member, and then they decide whether the landlord requires the unit in good faith or not. So it is really important that the test is requiring the unit in good faith. And the landlord has to stay there, live there for about a year, minimum a year, I'd say. So you can't just evict the tenant because you need the unit for 1 month, right?
Okay. So if you want your tenant to leave, you have to give 60 days notice, and he or
Yes.
she should agree on leaving.
Uh, it's not that it's a should, it's not a must, it's not mandatory. If they should leave, I mean, if they think that the notice is properly done, but if they think that the notice is not, it lacks the requirement of the good faith, they can dispute that notice.
Every eviction letter or notice should be sealed by landlord tenant board, or not really? Eviction.
Yes, either by the court or the landlord and tenant board. Between the landlords and tenants, it's the landlord and tenant board.
Okay.
Sometimes some orders, they come from higher courts or like Superior Court of Justice, but that depends, right? But I'd say most of the applications, they fall within the landlord and tenant board's jurisdiction.
Okay, here's a very tricky question.
Mhm.
If the landlord wants to add the rent substantially, not 2.5 this year, wants to add 5%.
Right.
Now, and the tenant agrees on that, say, you're right, the cost of everything went up, I'm okay
Mhm.
to add, to let you charge me 5% more and on. Is it agreement between both of them? Is that permitted?
I'd say it's not, it doesn't matter if it's permitted or not. I'd say if it's illegal, then it's illegal. People, they can just get into fights with each other and not call the police, and no one would really care. No one has to go to court, and that's it. There's a fight between two people, they just hit each other to even sometimes to this. But honestly, if someone doesn't have any complaint, it's not gonna matter. Like, it's not that the landlord and tenant board regularly goes to landlords and tenants and checks out, oh, what's happening here, right? It's when they have a dispute they go to the landlord and tenant board. Like, I mean, if this happens, I had a call like a while ago. It was a few weeks ago. It was one of the landlords, and he didn't know about the rent increase uh, laws, and he just called me and said, listen, I talked to the tenant, he agreed to do this, he paid me a few months, and now he's at the landlord and tenant board, and he's asking the board to give an order against me to return what was increased above that's a certain percentage, right? So I don't recommend this kind of agreements. If it's better to check the laws to make sure that everything is done properly, so afterwards people, they don't get into trouble. Now he has to return like $5,000, $6,000, which I believe he has paid it towards the mortgage, and now he's going to be left 5,000, 6,000 empty-handed, you know?
Yes. I was doing real estate investment before I become real estate agent some 20 years ago. That
Right.
was my highest recommendation for, immigrant. Um, I was recommending now to anyone to keep buying properties. Now, one thing I see this as a challenge is real estate investment is a business. Every business has its own challenge. If the owner of Walmart was afraid of shoplifting, he would have never ever opened those stores. Now,
Right.
almost the same thing for real estate investment. One day you might get challenged by construction, another day challenged by bad tenants. Now, what I always recommend my investors is to have a bigger picture and go from there. I was talking to some people, offer them to invest in real estate, and they say, "Oh, the tenant comes, they destroy our house." I said, "Hold on a second. They come. Let's say they make a big hole on the wall. Fixing
Right.
this big hole, it's going to cost you $200, $300. Now, imagine how much the value of your property is going to grow in a year." As soon as I say that, he got the bigger picture understood. So if there are small challenges, go for it. Don't do anything illegal. If you come across a tenant, just make sure you are not taking on conventional route to dealing with the tenant. Just always follow the law. Yes, you have to, if you have older properties, okay, you have to respect that landlord tenant board rate that they set every year. But
Right.
as soon as you want to cheat your way out, send the tenant another direction and get another tenant that pays you more, well, that you are playing a dangerous game here. Now,
That's right. So, Ashton, I want to ask you a question. So, because a lot of people, they come to me and they ask, like, why should I hire a real estate agent to just find the tenant for me?
okay.
Why should I pay that commission? Let's be honest, right? I know the answer, but I want my followers and the people just because I've talked to you many times. I know you care about the landlords, about the tenants, about all of your clients. But I wanted to mention this in this live session too. What's your answer to them? What do you think about this?
Well, I'm not only the homeowner, I'm advocate of buying investment property because I saw the power it could create. I remember the first time I bought my first house, it was many years ago. I bought it in Kitchener. Then I bought the second one there. I was thinking that, well, I went through the process. Long story short, I bought the first property for my daughter, saying my RESP contribution would not catch up with the amount of growth that this property could have, which was very true. So I bought the first property. I sold it many years after when my daughter went to university. The profit after tax was good enough to pay for her education. So that's the power of investment. And thanks to the government we have here, I'm not saying government as right now, I'm saying the structure that we have in this country that with rules and regulations. Otherwise, the price of homes would not grow and you would not take advantage of that growth for the property. Let's say we were living in a country that was war all the time. I guarantee you 100% the property I buy 200 today would stay the same amount 5 years down the road, because the regulation, rules and regulation establishment that we have in this country is amazing. So that is backing up the growth of the properties. Now, sometimes go chaotic. I know that. I'm not talking about those small hiccups, but altogether, the growth is so amazing, and it is such a source of wealth building that is one of the most secure one that I can call in this country. I'm talking about long term. I'm not talking about your house today instead of tomorrow. Long term, we're talking about 3 to 5 years, if not more. So all you do is to take advantage of the environment of the society you're living in there. And then, yes, you go through the challenges with tenant, with many other things that you could have for investment property. So I highly recommend all the individuals to buy. Now, here's the issue. You don't believe how many investors I see that went the wrong direction. And here's the problem with investors. They get too emotional. They are connecting with a house instead of connecting with numbers. I have clients said, can you buy this property for me? I said, give me a reason why I should buy it for you. By all means, I can do that. I'm a real estate agent.
Right.
But I care for my clients to the point that I want them to make money. And there's nothing wrong with making money. We are working hard here. We deserve it. Now, at least do the calculation. Just put some numbers together. Is the cost, would the tenant pays enough rent to cover your mortgage, your insurance, and your tax? No, then don't buy this property. Buy somewhere that all the expenses and the income would be equal. Now, I understand it's getting hard to get that, but then you go to multiplex or duplexes. Anyways, what I'm trying to say here is if you do your job properly, if you are doing your due diligence, you check all throughout the house, you know this neighborhood, if you buy it, within 5 to 10 days, you can get a tenant. A tenant is a good quality tenant that they pays on time. And you can get that information from all the stats, all the activities happening in neighborhood. The worst thing you can do is close your eyes, get emotional. You think you are investors because you buy 1 or 2 homes and you go the wrong way and you burn. And you come back to Daniel. So Daniel, help me with that.
I'm always here to help, and I'd be glad if I can help someone. Issues happen in life. It's life, as you said. Being a landlord is not a short-term thing, and some people, a lot of people actually, before they become a landlord, they're tenants themselves. So that most of them, they're understandable people. And they understand the tenant's position too. I believe always it's just the way of communication and the good relationship that matters between these two, because sometimes both of them, they're good people, but it's just a lack of communication. But that causes the problem. I believe we have a question here. Let's see, what do we have?
I don't see any question here.
I do.
Oh, you do?
Oh, it's to me. That's why.
Okay.
Let me read it for a second. So the question is that one of the landlords can't afford the mortgage anymore because of the mortgage hike and wants to sell the property, and they're asking about the options about this situation.
Good question.
So this is one of the situation that's a bit tricky. As I said, we had a full webinar on this that I believe, Ashton, you uploaded it on your channel on Google, on YouTube. So I believe it's the best way just to get an answer to this is by either calling us or just watching that episode and just doing some research. But if I want to just give a short answer to that question, is that either they have to become to an agreement with the tenant, like I believe as I did for a few of or one of your clients, and see whether the tenant agrees to leave that place, because sometimes it's easier for, as I heard from you and from other people, it's easier just to sell the unit without the tenant, and some investors they buy it for a higher value, and some homeowners they just like to move in immediately, so they don't want any houses with a tenant. So it's the best way is just to communicate and try to see what he really wants. But it's the best way trying to terminating the tenancy, even if it's an agreement. I recommend that they do it on paper. There are specific forms, and we do like mutual release agreement that no one really goes after the other party, and the tenant will definitely vacate the property by that day, because if there is no agreement, then the tenant doesn't have to leave. Like, I've never seen the landlord and tenant board accepting verbal agreement on this one. So it's better to sign the proper agreement form, which is provided by the landlord and tenant board. However, if the tenant doesn't want to leave, by all means, it's his right to stay, and the landlord has to sell the house with the tenant. So, if the new purchaser wants to move in or has a valid reason to evict the tenant, then the landlord has to give a notice to the tenant that, listen, the purchaser wants to come in, and you have like 60 days, 1 year, whatever it is, and you have to move out. If it doesn't happen, then they have to go to the landlord and tenant board, and we can just represent them to help them to achieve the goal that they want, right? I believe there's another question that we have here.
Okay, let me read it. How are the consequences if we evict the tenants and we don't have a good reason for that? What court is saying if the tenants prove that the landlord didn't occupy the property themselves, like the landlord tell them, leave because I want to move here, and the tenant realized that that was a lie.
That's a very good question. And, I've been dealing with these kind of issues a lot. So, these kind of applications, they call them T5 application. I believe we should have a session on this one, because a lot of people, they're asking for this. And I wrote an article in Farsi on my Facebook page, and I have an English version on my website. So, they call these kind of applications bad faith applications. So if, like, one of the requirements, if there's, let's talk about a scenario. If the landlord wants to just increase the rent and he knows that he can't do it. And if he just tells the tenant, listen, I'm coming to the unit, here is the N12 notice, I want to live there, I just need this unit for my son, and he's going to be occupying the unit, and the tenant finds out that, it's age of technology now, everyone has access to the MLS listings, and, people they see here, especially like nowadays, that the current market price is going to be higher than what they're paying. They're going to become sensitive to this. They're going to check. And for example, if the unit is advertised for rent for a higher price, then they can just go to the landlord and tenant board. And there are few remedies that they're available to the tenant. Like one of them, for example, is just that the landlord has to cover up to 12 months rent difference of the tenant for their new place, right? So for example, if the new place, like a similar place, a 2-bedroom that they're renting, and they had a 2-bedroom, the difference of price is $1,000, then 12 months, we are looking at 12 months, $12,000 of remedy that has to be paid to the tenant, right? So I highly recommend people to consult with us. They check the laws, and they have to be very careful before evicting a tenant, because there are a lot of remedies available to the tenants. And sometimes the act says that even the tenant is entitled up to 12 months of rent abatement. This means that they can get a refund of up to 12 months of what they have paid to the landlord. For example, if their rent is $3,000, then up to 12 months is $36,000 of remedy that the tenant is entitled to, right? It's very tricky. I highly recommend people to get legal advice before they do anything.
At what point someone should come to you for paralegal aid or help?
Most of the people that they have a tenant who's not paying the rent, or who's just paying the rent late, right? So that's why when I was talking to you, I said I recommend the landlords to save 6 months of rent or the mortgage in their pocket. So if they get into that kind of trouble, they don't have to financially suffer, and they don't have to lose their homes. So we have a lot of non-payment and late payment of rent cases. And on the other side, as you said, people, they don't want to move. So if the landlord wants the unit for themselves, they can't just have the unit for themselves, because the tenant is not moving out. So we have to take this application to the landlord and tenant board. And sometimes it's the tenant who's, suffering from a landlord who's, interfering with the tenant's reasonable enjoyment of the premises. Because if you're a tenant and if you're paying rent for a place, you're expecting that place to be, joyful and peaceful for you and for your family, right? That's the first right that comes to the tenant. You're paying for something, like it's just like a car. If you're leasing a car from a dealership, you don't want the dealer to come and say every month, oh, how are you doing? How's the car, right? So you don't want to see them, honestly. I'm paying rent. I'm just keeping the car in good condition, and I'm just using the car. So don't bother me a lot. So those are, and the bad faith applications, obviously, that we are dealing with it nowadays, and we are gonna be having a lot of applications, I believe, in a year from now or so, and there's gonna be a lot of remedies and damages awarded to the tenants if this happens.
Daniel, can a landlord ask for the first month and next 5 months together, like 6 months in advance?
The landlord, they cannot ask, but if I've heard from some of my clients that if the tenant is willing to pay 6 months up front to the landlord, right? From what I heard from you, this is happening a lot, right? I believe the landlords, they're trying to get 6 months or like sometimes up to a year. This is happening, Ashton. From what I'm hearing from you, from other friends, and from my clients, they can't find a home if they don't pay, the 1 year up front. And this is for Canadian people that they've been living in Canada for a while, and people that they're having a job. It's not only for the newcomers, because before they were saying, okay, I don't know, this guy is a newcomer and I don't know if he has a job, if he has an income, or if he has a credit store history. But right now they're asking from people that they've been living here for a while, and they have, a good history of paying the rent to the previous landlord. But the short answer is no. The landlord cannot ask for a security deposit. And however, if the tenant is willing to pay a few months upfront, then they may offer that to the landlord, and they may just pay a few months upfront.
I even
Only
heard.
the last months. And what is for a key, like if the rent is $3,000, the landlord can ask for the first and the last months, which is $6,000, let's say. And a key deposit, like if the cost of replacing the key is $300, then that's your number. The key deposit is $300.
So if you come back home and you realize that despite of what they put on the paper as non-smoker and not having any pet, you realize that they smoke and they just got a dog. That is not a reason for you to evict them.
The non-smoking, it depends. It's not, some of the landlords, like they're sharing same ventilation, or, the non-smoking, it can be enforceable. That is fine. But the no pet clause is not really an enforceable clause. So like I've been seeing a lot of people, they're putting it in the contracts. Some of your colleagues, they called me, Daniel, the landlord wants me to put it in the contract. Well, it's not enforceable. If you want to just see a dog that the tenant brings in after they move in, that's fine. But, it's gonna just make the situation worse, because you don't want to start a tenancy with lying to the landlord, because people, they know that a lot of people, they know that the no pet clause is not enforceable. No, it is not, unless the pet is in nature a dangerous one, or it causes like problems, like they're living in the same unit, they're living same ventilation, or so it's causing allergy to the other units and to the landlords specifically, and they knew that it's gonna cause this kind of allergy, then I'd say no pet clause is not enforceable.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. One of the reasons you can ask the tenant to leave is that you are going through a massive renovation, which the dust and everything is hazardous to their health. So you have to ask them to leave. However, once you finish the project, let's say 3 months down the road or 4 months, they are the first to be informed that if they want to come back with the same rent, they can occupy the comeback. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Like a lot of people, they try to evict the tenant because they're saying we want to do renovations. But honestly, unless it's a maintenance issue, not nobody really wants to invest in a property, like do 100K or 2000K, 200K to just in renovations and just give it back to the same tenant, unless they have purpose, they want to sell the unit afterwards. But no, they can't evict the tenant for that reason. So let's say we have to be careful with those kind of things too. And if the tenants, they're seeing these kind of notices, it's better if they seek legal advice first. They need to know their rights, so they don't end up with having unfortunately, if the prices they hike, if the price of the rent it hikes, which has hiked a little bit, I believe we're gonna be dealing with a lot of non-payment of rent applications before the board, which is going to cause another, again, backlog. Already we are waiting about, this is just like what I've been seeing, my own experience, but I'm just waiting for some applications, some of them 5 months, 6 months, sometimes even 7 months to just get a hearing date. So it's going to cause a lot of problem, I believe. So if you have any investors, it's better just them to make sure that they know about this, so they're prepared for what's coming, right? You don't want to just tell someone from who wants to come from Dubai to Canada in the middle of winter just to wear a t-shirt, right? You have to tell them it's cold.
Yeah,
If
as
they want to
in,
come or not, if they want to visit Canada or not, it's just like their own decision. But it's cold in here. And you're gonna freeze if you're wearing a t-shirt. You know, that's the reality, Ashton. So
well,
how do you see the market? How do you see the home value, like the property values? Are they going to be increasing, or do you think they're going to be decreasing? How do you see the future of the real estate in 6 months, or let's say a year from now?
uh, good question. Knowing that there are 500, 5 million, what's that? 500,000 new immigrants coming to this country every year. Number two, thanks to the system that is not perfect, they all end up coming to Toronto. Now, adding to that, number three, there is not enough proper setup for the builders to catch up with all this demand.
Right.
Supply and demand here. I think the price of homes continue going up, knowing that there is always hiccup. The hiccup happens sometimes because of government's new release coming up, new information coming up, or new policy would affect the market temporarily. But the price of properties continue going up. It was down, go up, come down, go up, but in long term, it's always going up. So if you're thinking of buying real estate investment, buy it, and the rest you have to take care of it as you're taking care of a business. But at the end of the day, 5 years down the road, 3 years down the road, that's a good wealth building machine for you.
And you think it's a good time to purchase a property right now? Is that correct?
The interest rate is high, the price of homes is down. When the interest rate comes down, the price of home go up. If you can afford it, buy a property in this market, buy a duplex possibly, so you can have two sources of income coming to your pocket. That would even off your high pressure payment of the interest rate that you're paying right now.
That's right.
But soon, sometimes middle of next year, apparently the interest rate is supposed to come down a little bit, and that would ease off the pressure that we have on the market. But yeah, I would always recommend to buy a good property, not jump into anything. My cousin said this house is amazing, it's beautiful, it's a good investment, buy it. Don't do unless you do your numbers, and that's important. If you want to be successful in real estate investment, and you can build it up. If you want to buy one house as an investment, that's a different story. But if you're looking at investing in real estate professionally, building 1, 2, 3 homes, sky is the limit. This banking system we have here is amazing, and you can rely on it.
That's right. So Ashton, I just like to emphasize that the people that they're trying to rent out the part of their property, they have to make sure that that unit, it meets the requirements with the city and with the fire department. Like, it has to be a legal unit. So because some properties, they're like some houses, they're not suitable for two families. Like, God forbid, if something happens, the tenant in the basement, for example, if there is a fire hazard or if the house is burning, they need a runaway, right? So it's better to make sure that people that they're purchasing those kind of properties, they meet these kind of condition. I believe our time is up. It's almost 9 o'clock. Wow. Thanks, Ashton.
Anyone has any questions?
I don't see a lot of questions in the live. It's just like
I don't see any question here.
I believe we covered most of the topics.
Daniel, what is your phone number? People can contact you.
My phone number is 647-544-3247. People, they are welcome to call me anytime from 8 in the morning to like 6 in the afternoon. Or they can visit my website. It is wirelesslegalservices.ca, and they can contact me that way. It's just like it says number again, 647-544-3247. And thank you. It was a very informative session. Mike to everyone. And Ashton, can you share your contact information with us as well?
My phone number, if you need any real estate investment property, it's 647-407-4049. And I just put the email address for both of us on the chat.
Thank you,
And
Ashton.
you can if you reach any of us, we are always connected. We always talk about real estate investment,
That's
or
right.
legal issues. So you have a good real estate team with you that can help.
Absolutely. We are here to support both the landlords and tenants, and especially investors.
Excellent.
Have a good night, Ashton. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for watching us today.
Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.